This movie begins with a prisoner writing in a notebook. Then he grabs a clamp to end the life of his cellmate. Afterwards, we see the prison guards burying a pair of corpses. Now we follow the story of our protagonist, a man with problems in his relationship. As he heads home after his working hours, he decides to call Gray again. When she asks him if he thinks he has been selfish in the relationship, the power goes out. He checks the breakers and switches them back on. Kyle calls her and tells her that he will take a few days off to spend more time together. Right at that moment, an intruder appears to try to take advantage of her. Kyle gets distracted from the road and crashes into a parked vehicle. Since he manages to hear his girlfriend's screams, he rushes off while calling the police to report that his wife is in danger. On the other hand, we see the intruder trying to abuse Gray. Since she does not stop struggling, he ends up stabbing her in the abdomen. When our protagonist arrives, it is already too late. As he approaches his wife, the intruder tries to knock him out. Kyle chases him onto a tram. They fight, and the killer pulls out his knife. Kyle manages to overpower him, but the killer elbows him, causing him to crash into a motorcycle. When the patrol arrives, the officers arrest him. Although he tries to explain that they killed his wife, they do not listen to him, so the killer manages to escape. In the next scene, we see the judge declaring the killer of Gray innocent. According to our protagonist's lawyer, the killer's family is wealthy. They bought the jury. The evidence was more than enough to prove he was guilty. Kyle gets angry and grabs one of the officer's guns to take revenge on his own. Because of that, they end up giving him life imprisonment. On his first day in prison, one of the guards hits him with a baton for not wanting to hand over his wife's ring. While they were taking roll, our protagonist notices that the guard is wearing the ring. Late at night, Kyle sees the guards with one of the inmates forcibly taking the youngest new prisoner. This since he caught the attention of one of the inmates when he first saw him. He saw him as fresh meat with which he could have fun in bed. The next morning, Kyle sees the new inmate crying. Then Andre leaves his cell and blows him a kiss, a gesture that makes him remember the killer of his wife. Kyle hits him, and the guards detain him. Since he usually trades with them, they throw him into solitary for a while. Thinking he has lost everything in his life, our protagonist tries to hang himself. He hits the wall but cannot do it. At that moment, a moth appears, and our protagonist has a memory with Gray. She used to tell him that some people believe that when they die, they become moths. When they finally take him out of solitary, they take him to the cell of the prisoner from the first scene. It turns out he ended the lives of his last 3 cellmates. They call him Prisoner 451. After working almost the entire afternoon, his wife's brother visits him to tell him that they already held her funeral. He found a place near the water surrounded by trees. That is what both of them wanted. Paul tells him he can buy off the guards. He just has to make them earn money. When he goes out to the yard, Andre tries to hit him with a ball. He misses and hits another inmate. Both groups confront each other, and the guard stops them. If they want to fight, they must go to the Sparker. Billy talks to our protagonist. He tells him that he still does not understand why he was sentenced to prison. He was traveling and met a girl. They both had a couple of drinks, and she crashed her car into a restaurant. He was accused of intentional negligence against private property. They gave him 1.5 years in prison. An inmate in a wheelchair approaches him and tells him that his case was in the newspaper. Anyone would have done the same. That killer had it more than deserved. Kyle asks him if he knows anything about the guy who threw the ball at him. Malachi tells him he is part of the Russian Mafia. The man beside him is the leader of the gang. They have deals with the guards. They're the ones who rule the prison. The rest of the gangs try to kill each other. The activity is constant. The whole place is like a war zone. If he wants to get out of Prisoner 451's cell, he must pay the guard. Until then, he must be careful with him. The guy is completely insane. That same night, the prisoner attacks our protagonist. He tells him he must keep silent. Silence gives him peace and quiet. At breakfast, Andre approaches to try to intimidate him. He spits in his food, and Billy tries to hit him, but his partner stops him. Andre walks away, telling him he likes tough guys. Tonight, they will play alone. Later, Kyle gives the guards some money to move him to a different cell. They accept the money but tell him it is not enough. Due to the dispute between both gangs, the guards organize fights. The general earns a lot of money betting with his friends. The fist fight begins, and it seems even, but in the end, the one who comes out victorious is Andre. Kyle asks Malachi if his cellmate fights. He tells him he does not. The reason he is still in prison is because the guards earn a lot of money bringing inmates to a cell. He disposes of the ones they do not like. On the other hand, we see Billy sharpening his brush. When they hand it to the mobster, he takes out the brush and tries to attack him, but Andre defends himself and stabs him in the abdomen. While they were working, one of the inmates messes with our protagonist. The guards stop him, and the attacker tells them that he disrespected him. For that reason, the guards decide to let them fight. Kyle dominates him, but Zarek's friends step in to help him. Thanks to that, they manage to give him a beating. As if that were not enough, the guards take him to solitary. Next to that cell, they hear screams and blows from a prisoner. When he comes out of solitary, Kyle sees one of the inmates bringing a banquet into the cell from which the screams come. Then he runs into the mobsters. They tell him that from now on, he will be Billy's new replacement. A couple of hours later, the rival gang slits the throat of one of the inmates. When he returns to the cell, Kyle reads one of prisoner 451's notes. Hate gives him strength even when there is no hope. Tomorrow will be the day. Hate will fix everything. Hate keeps him alive. At that moment, the prisoner appears. He stares at him, but does nothing to him. At lunchtime, the mobster tells Billy he is glad to see him again. For now, he will play with his partner. They will take turns depending on his taste. Kyle decides to confront him, but the others interfere and beat him up again. The guards stop the fight and take our protagonist to solitary. Tired of the same routine, he decides to train to defend himself. The next morning, one of the prisoners finds a mine. At that moment, a vehicle drives through the mined area. They try to stop it, but the vehicle explodes. Billy and his partner take advantage of the situation and try to escape. In the end, the guards kill one of them and capture Billy. Once back in prison, the guards give him a couple of hits. As punishment, he will have to spend some time with Andre. In the following scenes, we see our protagonist training for several days, even training in his cell, without caring about his cellmate. Since his change is noticeable, the guards see potential to make money by betting on the fights. The general believes the opposite. It is impossible for the American to win. As the fight begins, Andre dominates during the first minutes, giving him a great beating. To everyone's surprise, Kyle turns the fight around. He bites his neck and rips off a piece of flesh in a bloody way. When he returns to the cell, his cellmate asks him if he feels good now. As the days go by, our protagonist keeps fighting different inmates whom he manages to defeat in a bloody way. The general bets on him and makes his companions win their bets. Since he now sees a lot of potential in him, he asks one of his men to bring the best fighter from his prison to set up a fight with Kale. When they set up a fight with Zarek, our protagonist beats him up. Although he messed with him during his first days in prison, Kyle ends up forgiving him. The guard approaches and tells him he must end the fight. For that reason, he ends up knocking him out with a kick. Some time later, Paul visits him to tell him that he talked to the ambassador, to which Kyle tells him not to give him hope. Whatever he does, nothing will change. He must forget about him. In the next scene, we see his next opponent introducing himself to him. Valia squeezes his hand tightly to try to intimidate him, but our protagonist does the same. When they walk away, his cellmate tells him that they brought him from another prison to fight him. While the general gives his speech to the inmates, Billy takes the opportunity to try to escape from the prison, but they end up catching him again. In the next scene, they reveal that his own cellmate was the one who ratted him out. To carry out his plan, he had to make deals with him to get him the tools. A couple of hours later, Kyle sees the fighter from the other prison coming out of Billy's cell. To make him angry at his opponent, they let him into the cell. Billy tells him that Valia tried to do things to him. He spat in his face. He could not overpower him. He must not allow them to turn him into something he is not. After saying that, Billy leaves this world. When the fight between the inmates finally begins, Kyle takes a position refusing to fight. His opponent hits him and tries to provoke him. The guards interfere and threaten to beat him, to which our protagonist tells them that he will not play their games. They inform the general and he asks them to take him out to start another fight. As a form of punishment, they leave him outside until he decides to fight again. The next morning, prisoner 451 asks Malachi to get him gasoline. He asks what he wants it for. 451 answers that it is from Billy. He heard him talking to the guards. He betrayed his own best friend. Malachi tells him that he needs special attention. He has sores all over his body. They promised him that if he kept his eyes and ears open, they would give him the proper care. He did not want Billy to be killed. He is just trying to survive as hell. Despite this, prisoner 451 ends his life. In the following scenes, they reveal his story. When he is little, his classmates make fun of him. His teacher takes advantage of his innocence. One day, he literally sets him on fire. As the days go by, the gang leaders put aside their differences to unite for our protagonist's cause. The guards and the general cannot do anything. If they oppose the gangs, many of them are going to die. They no longer have any power. Since his death is not convenient for them, they give him medical attention, and as a form of punishment, they send him to the dungeon. To force him to fight, they release the beast named Milos. Since he spent a lot of time near his cell, Kyle notices that he calms down when he hits the wall. He does so, and Milos stops. The guard takes out a gun and orders them to keep fighting. Our protagonist asks him to end his life. He will not fight again. The prisoners revolt, and Milos attacks the guards, receiving several shots. Even so, he knocks out 2 of the guards. While the prisoners figure out how to bring down the door, Kyle says goodbye to Milos. Then he frees his companion. They move away from the disturbance, and 451 tells him that he killed his cellmates because they talked too much. Sometimes it is better not to say anything. Kyle tells him that he must get out of the prison. He tells him that someone murdered his wife. For a moment, he became a beast. 451 proposes a plan so he can escape the prison. He shows him a notebook in which he wrote all the deaths of the last 20 years. He has to do one last fight. After that, they will take him to the field to kill him. After 2 weeks under strict confinement, our protagonist fights Valia. Despite his great size, Kyle dominates the fight more easily than when he fought Andre. He applies a technique with which he manages to break his arm. When he sees that he cannot do anything, the inmate pulls out a blade to try to kill him. Kyle dodges the slashes and in the process ends the life of the Mafia leader. On the other hand, we see prisoner 451 carrying out the escape plan. When Valia is knocked out, the guards take Kyle to one of the vehicles. At that moment, his companion appears to help him. Despite everything, our protagonist decides to spare the guard's life. He orders him to remove the handcuffs and recovers the ring of his late partner. Before leaving, he drops a car on his legs as revenge. His companion tells him that he must take the general's car. No one will stop him. Kyle asks if he will come with him, to which he responds that the prison is all he has. He gives him the record of the deaths and asks him to make sure it is exposed. When our protagonist manages to leave without problems, we see 451 in the general's room. By the time the guards appear, it is already too late for the general. With a message telling us that 3 months later the prison is shut down, the movie ends.